Between the east and the west, hidden deep within the rugged mountains of the Arabian Peninsula, lies an ancient secret, a forgotten epic of 16 mighty kings, whose names have been mysteriously erased from modern history books. Kings who led massive armies, conquered the known world, and built an empire that rivaled the glory of Rome. Welcome to MindBlow Facts. Today, we uncover the hidden truth about the ancient kings of Yemen. This isn't just a story about a kingdom. It's a revelation that could flip everything you know about the origins of human civilization, from the true builder of the legendary Marib Dam to the shocking historical texts claiming that this very land birthed the Pharaohs of Egypt and the mighty empires of Mesopotamia. Join us on this majestic journey as the stones speak and forgotten history is finally revealed. Our story begins around 3500 BC, long before the golden ages of Greece or Rome. The lands of ancient Yemen were fractured, ruled by scattered warlords and divided tribes. That is, until a visionary leader emerged, King Saba. He didn't just want power, he wanted an indestructible, unified superstate. Saba built a magnificent capital city bearing his name, establishing one of the first centralized governments in human history. But his ambition was limitless. Ancient Arab historians describe Saba as a military genius who launched unprecedented military campaigns. He gathered a massive army and marched out of the Arabian Peninsula, successfully conquering Babylon, the lands of Assyria, and pushing his forces all the way to the borders of Egypt. He was the first king in recorded Arab history to take prisoners of war, earning him his legendary name. He wasn't just a king, he was a global conqueror. But the most mind-blowing fact about King Saba isn't just his wars, it's about survival and a master plan that would alter the genetic makeup of the world. As the Sabaean Empire boomed, a massive population crisis hit. The land could no longer sustain the sheer number of people. King Saba made a decision that would change human history forever: the Great Migration. According to ancient historians like Ibn Khaldun, and supported by several modern scholars of Semitic history, massive waves of migrants were directed out of Yemen to settle in unpopulated regions across the globe. They didn't just settle, they built the world we know. Scholars like the English Assyriologist A.H. Seiss suggest that the fierce Akkadians and Assyrians of Mesopotamia, the ones who built Babylon, actually originated from these southern Arabian migrations. They brought advanced agricultural and irrigation techniques from Yemen and used them to tame the rivers of Mesopotamia. And it gets even crazier. Deep historical records and archaeological studies point to a massive migration across the Red Sea and the Sinai Peninsula into the Nile Valley. These highly cultured migrants from Yemen merged with the native populations of North Africa. The result? The birth of the ancient Egyptians and the dawn of the pharaohs. Yes, the architects of the first great human civilizations might have all started their journey from the forgotten mountains of Yemen.
These ancient migrants didn't just walk into Egypt. They brought civilization with them. The knowledge of copper metallurgy, city building, writing, and art. It was the spark that ignited the pharaonic era. In fact, ancient Egyptian inscriptions refer to Yemen as the land of Punt, or Ta-Netjer, which translates to the land of the gods. Why would the pharaohs call Yemen the land of the gods? Perhaps because the sacred incense used in their temples came from there. Or perhaps because they knew it was the true homeland of their ancestors. After securing his global empire, King Saba returned to Yemen to build a true wonder of the ancient world, the Great Dam of Marib, a megastructure designed to capture the floodwaters of 70 different valleys, To put this into perspective, historians state that comparing modern dams to the Great Dam of Marib is like comparing a child to a giant. German archaeological expeditions have confirmed this colossal structure functioned perfectly for thousands of years, but King Saba would not live to see it finished. Upon his death around 3416 BC, the throne passed to his most legendary son, King Himyar. He was a man of immense wealth and power, and the very first Arabian king to place a golden crown upon his head. According to ancient records, the kingdom's massive power was strategically divided. Himyar held the sword and the pen, mastering politics and ultimate governance, while his brother, Kalan, took the horse and the bow, commanding the fierce ancient armies and protecting the borders. Together, they were unstoppable. King Himyar continued his father's legacy of global domination. Ancient historians claim his armies pushed deep into the east, conquering foreign nations and expanding the empire's reach. He then turned his sights back to the Arabian Peninsula, where a rebellious tribe known as Thamud was causing chaos. Himyar's forces crushed their rebellion and banished them to the harsh mountains of the Hijaz. There, the defeated tribe was forced to carve massive homes straight out of the solid rock, just to survive the blistering heat. But the king's greatest challenge came from across the sea. A desperate message arrived from his brother in Egypt, who was struggling to maintain control. A massive, violent uprising was threatening to destroy the Egyptian territories. Without hesitation, King Himyar marched his armies into Africa. He crushed the rebellion on the banks of the Nile and relentlessly pursued his enemies all the way to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. It is said he remained in the West for 100 years, building fortresses, establishing cities, and forging a global legacy. But even the greatest kings must fall. As his life neared its end, King Himyar gathered his 12 sons for one final lesson. His last words were not about wealth or gold, but about the ultimate secret to absolute power. He told them, 2 men perfectly united will always defeat 4 divided men. An unbreakable alliance of 5 will easily crush 10. He looked at his heirs and warned them, unity is the only way to hold the empire. Once divided, the greatest civilization on earth will fall. But while King Himyar ruled from the throne, his brother Kalan commanded the borders. Kalan deployed massive armies and ancient tribes across the Arabian Peninsula. He sent fierce warriors to the mountains of Hijaz, to the deep deserts of Najd, and to the borders of the Levant. These migrations laid the foundation for some of the most famous tribes in Arab history, tribes that would eventually build kingdoms in Iraq and the Levant, centuries later. But the true shock comes with the kings who followed. What if history isn't exactly as we were taught? What if the ancient kings of Yemen didn't just trade with Babylon? What if they ruled it? When King Wael, the son of Himyar, took power, his ambition could not be contained within Arabia. Ancient cuneiform tablets discovered in Babylon reveal a stunning truth that many historians ignored. They speak of an Amorite king named Wael, a king of Saba and Babylon, who ruled around 1894 BC. He marched his armies into Mesopotamia, not just to conquer, but to protect his Amorite allies. For decades, the ultimate overlord of Babylon, the cradle of civilization, was actually a king from Yemen. After Wael came King Al-Saksak, a ruler whose legacy is tied to one of the most legendary lost structures in human history, the Palace of Ghumdan. Built in the ancient city of Sana'a, it was an architectural marvel dedicated to the planet Venus. Historians claim it stood for 4,000 years, a massive skyscraper of the ancient world, reaching into the clouds, where nations would come from all over the earth just to witness its glory. But perhaps the most chilling story of this era belongs to his descendant, King Al-Mu'afir, a fierce warrior king who spent his life fighting rebellions and securing the empire's vast borders. When death finally came for Al-Mu'afir, he made a bizarre and terrifying final request to his sons. He commanded them, "Do not bury me lying down. If I lie down, your kingdom will fall. Bury me standing up, so that your empire remains standing." Centuries later, during the Islamic Umayyad Caliphate, a hidden cave was discovered in the mountains of Yemen. Inside, explorers found unimaginable treasures, ancient swords, and golden armor. But they also found a massive marble pillar sealed tightly with lead. When they broke it open, they found the ancient king, perfectly preserved, standing upright. On his head rested a golden crown, inscribed with the chilling words, "I am Al-Mu'afir." But what if the most famous king of Babylon, the man who gave us the first written laws, was not who we thought he was? History teaches us about Hammurabi, the great Babylonian king, famous for his code of laws. But ancient texts and recently deciphered cuneiform tablets reveal a shocking twist. Hammurabi was not the supreme ruler of the ancient world. He had an older brother, King Shams Ad, the supreme ruler of Saba in Yemen. According to historians and translations of ancient Amorite texts, Hammurabi actually ruled Babylon under the direct authority of his older brother. Look closely at the famous Stele of Hammurabi. Modern historians claim it shows him receiving laws from the sun god. But what if he wasn't looking at a god? What if the mighty figure sitting on the throne is actually King Shams Ad, giving commands to his younger brother? The empire of Saba didn't just stop at Babylon. When Shams Ad passed the torch to his son, King Shaddad, the world trembled. Shaddad gathered an unstoppable army, marching relentlessly through Iraq, Persia, and the Levant. Some ancient records even suggest his forces crossed into Egypt, becoming the mysterious conquerors known in history as the Hyksos. He conquered the known world, gathering the greatest treasures of the earth. And with those treasures, King Shaddad built a city of myth and legend, a city mentioned in the Holy Quran, described as having no equal in all the lands. Iram of the Pillars, deep in the deserts of southern Yemen, near modern-day Aden. Shaddad built palaces of gold and silver, supported by pillars of emerald and ruby. He diverted rivers to flow beneath his castles. For a brief moment in time, he created a literal paradise on earth. But like all great empires, his reign eventually came to an end. He was buried in a hidden mountain cave, leaving behind a legacy that would blur the line between history and myth.
But perhaps the most mystical king of this ancient era was Shaddad's brother, King Luqman. He wasn't just a ruler. Ancient scholars described him as a deeply righteous man, possessing immense wisdom, and some even believed he was a prophet. He ruled over Assyria and Syria before returning to the rugged mountains of Yemen. But King Luqman is not remembered for his wars or his wealth. He is remembered for a chilling legend that defies human mortality, the legend of the Seven Eagles. According to ancient Arab historians and pre-Islamic poetry, Luqman prayed for a life longer than any mortal man. His prayer was answered, but with a strange and mystical condition. He was granted the combined lifespan of 7 eagles. Luqman would take a newborn eagle, raise it, and when it eventually died of old age, he would take another. He outlived generation after generation, watching empires rise and fall, kings being born and buried, while he remained untouched by time. Finally, the time came for the 7th and final eagle, a magnificent bird he named Lubad, which translates to eternity. Luqman's life was now strictly bound to the beating heart of this single bird. For decades, they were inseparable. But one day, the eagles took to the sky from the highest mountain peaks. But Lubad did not follow. Luqman climbed the mountain, suddenly feeling a terrifying, unfamiliar weakness in his own bones. He found Lubad on the ground, his feathers falling, unable to lift his heavy wings. The ancient king called out, "Rise, Lubad, rise!" But the great eagle simply collapsed and breathed his last breath. At that exact moment, the ancient king's heart stopped. The man who had lived for centuries fell beside his eagle, and the legend of Luqman finally came to an end. A story passed down through ancient poetry, echoing through the sands of time. With the death of the ancient kings, the first great era of Saba came to a close. But from the ashes of this ancient time, a new, terrifyingly powerful dynasty would rise, a bloodline of 70 legendary monarchs, known as the Tubba Kings, just as Egypt had its pharaohs and Rome had its Caesars. Yemen had the Tubba. Their power was so absolute, and their legacy so massive, that they are explicitly mentioned in the Holy Quran. But to earn the title of Tubba, a king could not just rule a city, he had to conquer and unite the entire Arabian Peninsula, from the deep deserts to the coasts of Africa. The first of these supreme rulers was a visionary named Al-Harith al-Riyash. Around 1470 BC, he united the fractured kingdoms of the East and West, creating an unstoppable superstate. But his greatest revolution wasn't military. It was spiritual. Long before the spread of modern religions, King Al-Riyash rejected the multiple idols of the ancient world. He introduced a powerful monotheistic faith, worshipping a single supreme creator, often symbolized by the pure light of the sun. With his nation united and his faith solidified, Al-Riyash looked beyond the borders of Arabia. He launched one of the most massive military campaigns in human history. His armies stormed into Babylon, crushed the Persian forces, and liberated Assyria from the terrifying Hittite Empire. And he didn't just conquer, he initiated another massive migration. He sent ancient Yemeni tribes to settle in the Levant, Mesopotamia, and across the Mediterranean, tribes that modern history would later call the Arameans and the Phoenicians. The master navigators of the ancient world and the true architects of the alphabet. Yes, the very letters we use to write history today might have been born from the conquests of a forgotten Yemeni king. But of all the Tubba kings, one name echoes through the halls of time louder than any other. A ruler whose story is so profound, it is immortalized in the Holy Quran, Dhul-Qarnayn. For centuries, Western historians have incorrectly claimed this was Alexander the Great. But ancient Arab scholars knew the truth. Alexander was a Greek polytheist whose empire lasted barely 15 years. The true Dhul-Qarnayn was an ancient Yemeni king named Al-Sa'ab, a devoted monotheist who lived more than 1,000 years before Alexander was even born. His legendary title, the Two-Horned One, came from his terrifying battle helmet, forged of heavy bronze and copper, featuring two massive horns. King Al-Sa'ab did not just rule an empire. He embarked on the greatest expedition in human history. He marched his colossal army across Egypt and North Africa until he reached the absolute edge of the known world, the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. There, he stood at the edge of the earth, watching the sun set into a vast, dark, and murky ocean. But his journey didn't stop in the west. He turned his armies toward the farthest reaches of the east, marching through Persia and India, all the way to the borders of ancient China, discovering isolated civilizations, living under the direct, scorching rays of the rising sun. Yet, his most astonishing legacy lies in the mysterious north. Deep within the treacherous mountains of the Caucasus, he encountered a terrified society. They begged the great king for protection against a savage, unstoppable horde that brought absolute destruction to the surface. The tribes of Gog and Magog. Dhul-Qarnayn did not build a simple wall of stone and mud like the Great Wall of China. Using the advanced metallurgy of his Yemeni ancestors, he forged a towering, impenetrable barrier, a massive dam made of giant iron blocks, sealed together with boiling molten copper, a structure so unimaginably strong it trapped the savage hordes deep within the earth, where they remain hidden, waiting for the end of days. But the story of the Tubba kings does not end with the Great Wall of Iron. Centuries later, around 1220 BC, during the time of the prophet Moses, another titan took the throne. King Baran Riyash, a ruler so unimaginably powerful, ancient historians simply called him the King of Kings. He didn't just want military conquest, he wanted absolute global dominance. He gathered an apocalyptic army of 150,000 warriors and launched a coordinated invasion across land and sea. His fleets dominated the Indian Ocean, while his massive cavalry crushed the kingdoms of India and Central Asia. He built entirely new cities in the heart of India, just to serve as trading outposts for his massive empire. When he returned to Yemen, he brought back wealth that defies human imagination: gold, rare spices, and tens of thousands of skilled craftsmen and engineers, transforming the mountains of Yemen into an industrial and agricultural powerhouse. But Riyash was not satisfied. He turned his terrifying gaze to the great powers of the north. His armies swept through Mesopotamia, crushing the rulers of Babylon and obliterating the feared Hittite Empire in Anatolia. For over a century, modern archaeologists have been deeply puzzled by ancient cuneiform letters found in the sands of Egypt and the ruins of Greece. Letters from a mysterious supreme emperor named Riyash, who commanded the pharaohs and built palaces in ancient Europe. Western scholars assumed he was just a local Babylonian king, but ancient Arab records reveal the staggering truth. Riyash was none other than Baran Riyash. His Yemeni empire was so vast, his royal seals were found in the ancient ruins of Thebes in Greece, and his letters dictated terms to the rulers of Egypt. He had successfully created the first true global superpower in human history. But the global expansion did not stop with the King of Kings. His son, King Al-Manar, turned his terrifying gaze toward the west. He was known as the Lord of the Lighthouses. As his massive armies marched into the uncharted territories of Europe and North Africa, he built colossal flaming towers along his path, so his armies could find their way back from the edge of the world. But what they found at the edge of the world was the stuff of nightmares. Al-Manar sent his son, Al-Adhar, deep into the frozen dark corners of the extreme north and west. There, ancient Arab historians record a chilling encounter. The Yemeni army came face to face with a terrifying mutated species of hominids known as the Nas. Ancient texts describe them as incredibly strong, savage, and terrifying to look at. A brutal war erupted in the freezing dark. The Yemeni forces exterminated most of the Nas, bringing a few captured survivors back to their empire. When the people saw these monstrous creatures, they were struck with absolute terror, earning the prince his title, Du al-Ad'ar, the bringer of terror. But out of all the kings of this era, one would leave a mark so massive, it is literally printed on every world map today. King Ifriqish. In the late 12th century BC, King Ifriqish launched a massive demographic shift. He relocated ancient Canaanite and Yemeni tribes, marching them across the deserts of Egypt to settle in the vast untamed lands of North Africa. These ancient Arabian migrants merged with the local populations, becoming the ancestors of the fierce Berber warriors. King Ifriqish built a magnificent capital city in this new land and named it after himself, the city of Ifriqiya. Over the centuries, the Romans and Greeks would adopt this name, and eventually, the entire continent became known to the world as Africa. Yes, the continent of Africa was named after an ancient king from the mountains of Yemen. From the towering palaces of ancient Sana'a to the walls of iron that hold back the apocalypse, from the naming of the African continent to the very letters we use to write history today, the ancient kings of Yemen did not just build a kingdom, they built the world. Yet their names were wiped from our modern textbooks, relegated to myths and whispered legends. But the desert never forgets, the sands are shifting, and the true history of human civilization is finally coming to light. What other ancient secrets are hidden beneath the sands? Could the history we've been taught all our lives be entirely wrong? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If this journey blew your mind, hit that like button, subscribe to MindBlow Facts, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another hidden truth. Until next time, keep questioning reality.